r/AskReddit by Reddit. People of Reddit who have met a celebrity, which one? And how was the experience? My dad wrote a book called Horse Soldiers. It was adapted into a movie called 12 Strong. My family got to go the premiere in New York City, and I got to meet Chris Hemsworth, Michael Shannon, and Rob Riggle. I also got to meet Matt Damon, because he was also just watching the premiere. My family got to meet Chris and my grandma dropped her bag and Chris picked it up. My grandma looked at him with pure adoration in her eyes. Later, after discovering that Chris Hemsworth's wife is several years older than him, exclaimed, "Now that I know he's into older women, I might have a chance." I worked at a coffee shop when I was younger, a Starbucks inside a gigantic Chapters store. Robin Williams came in while I was working, and I took his order and made his coffee. I was completely starstruck. He was my favorite movie star when I was a kid. I didn't have much of an interaction with him. He was courteous, but just after a coffee and something to read. What really struck me was that there were maybe 60 or 70 other people getting coffee or looking at books, and every single one of them was staring at him the entire time he was there. People talk about the price of fame, and it always sounded like horse poo to me, but after that I totally believe it. Imagine never being able to go and do anything without everyone who saw you knowing who you were, and, for them, any interaction you have becomes a story they remember. It's tucked up. I met Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore when they were married, when they rented a nearby house for the Super Bowl in town. I was super young and a bunch of us rode our bikes to see them. He made a point of walking out to hug and take pictures with everyone, and was all around a super charming guy. She was a little more standoffish but still sweet. He drove around the neighborhood a few times the days before and would always smile and wave to everyone. I met Tom Holland. I was his Uber driver. I geeked out for a second. Initially, he kind of popped out of nowhere. Even if it was a non-celebrity, I would have been startled. But since it was him, I was startled and blurred out, "You're Spider-Man," like a fucking idiot. He responded with, "No, I'm not," and proceeded to ask about my day. Super nice. We talked for a bit, and the rest of the ride we both enjoyed our own music. He put his AirPods in, and I with my car speakers. Luckily, I didn't freak him out too much, because he left a nice tip through the app. My dad and I went to a comp for my 16th birthday. As we are just walking around, we see this guy in a really good Jack Sparrow costume, so we ask if we can snap a photo and he says of course. So I stand next to him, and my dad snaps the photo. A few months after the con, he's talking to one of his co-workers and shows him the photo. Apparently I got a photo unknowingly with Johnny Depp, who's known to go to small cons in full costume. My experience with him was great. He was super kind and chill. My dad worked on Equus when Daniel Radcliffe starred in it. He got me a ticket to the Christmas Eve show, and afterwards I was brought backstage with the cast and crew for a little party in one of the dressing rooms. As I was walking into the dressing room, Daniel was just standing in the doorway and said something like, "Pardon me," so I could get in, like he was in my way. I remember turning bright red and telling him he was fantastic, and he shook my hand and thanked me for coming. He was so genuine and chill. My dad, who was a part of the crew, got to interact with him pretty frequently, enough to have little inside jokes even, and he also said he was one of the most down-to-earth people he'd ever met. All in all, a really cool guy and a phenomenal actor. Side note, this was the play that required his character to be completely naked at one point. I remember how surreal it was to shake the hand of someone I'd seen in all of the Harry Potter movies growing up, and thinking, "Wow, I just saw your penis and now we're in a doorway shaking hands, and my god, you are lovely." Met Elton John backstage once. He was so businesslike that it was what I imagine it's like to meet the Queen. We were lucky enough to get backstage friends of Elton instead of friends of the band or press. So we had a lovely waiting room with free booze and snacks. We waited about 30 minutes till he was ready for us. Step 1. Stand in a line and shake hands with an individual comment for each person. Step 2. Ask for cameras and hand them to assistant. Step 3. He puts his chubby arms around you and smiles for the photo. Assistant takes like 3 photos per camera. Step 4. He thanks you for coming and tells you to enjoy the show. Total time 1 minute for a group of 8. At a hotel I worked at as a valet, I got to meet Post Malone, who was dining at the steakhouse connected to hotel. He pulled up in his custom Rolls Royce with a white Suburban in tow with his guests and security. The coolest part of this story, other than being able to drive his car, was when he came outside for a smoke. He was by himself and we got to small talk for a good 5 minutes. The convo ranged from where we both grew up to what we like to do in our free time. He was a really cool, down to earth guy. PS, before anyone asks, no, he did not smell. At Warped Tour 99 I met Eminem before he got famous, and I had no idea who he was. I accidentally kicked a rock into the back of his shoe, and when he turned around I started to apologize, and he immediately began yelling and calling me a bitch. A few minutes later my friends and I were waiting for a band to start on one stage, but the performer on the stage next to us was getting booed by everyone. So we look over, and I'm like, oh hey, it's that guy who called me a bitch. Boo-hoo. Anyway, he got booed off the stage in his hometown of Detroit. A few months later he was all over MTV and music magazines, and then everyone knew who he was. I've met a handful. I was born with 5 congenital heart defects and 2 congenital lung defects, many open heart surgeries, and other health issues. And from time to time, someone would come to Children's in Chicago. I'm 2003, I was 13 and it was Friday the 13th. I had an upper respiratory infection and was admitted because I was having my 4th open heart surgery 3-ish weeks from then. I was released, and like always we were staying at Ronald McDonald House. That next day I spent 3-ish hours with Nick Carter and 3-ish hours with Celine Dion. It was World Children's Day and Chicago was the host that year. While I'm in no way saying Backstreet Boys are like the Beatles, but meeting Nick was like my version of meeting a Beatle. He and Celine were so incredibly kind. I was sitting next to Celine and sang. It was amazing, and helped getting my mind off things. About a week later we were told I was on the cover of Us Weekly with Celine. And that next fall, a commercial ran for about 3 years for Ronald McDonald House. It is very strange in watching TV, and then you see yourself on TV. A few years later a family had gifted tickets to a Hilary Duff concert because their daughter was too sick to go. So I got to meet her before the concert. We went backstage, got to our seats in a golf cart. About 3 weeks later I'd gotten a package. It was from her. She was touched by my story/life and wanted to help in some way. It had a lot of things, but my favorites were actual clothes from her closet. I still wear one. There's a few more, but these are the highlights. Taylor Swift is known pretty well for her way she meets fans. I was at her 1989 tour. It was my first Taylor concert, and she was performing Love Story where she just circles the building on her piano. I was so happy in that moment I started to cry. Next thing I know someone is tapping on my shoulder, and I turn around and see her mom. She asked me how I was, and I was crying, and said I'm doing great. She asked who I was there with, and was really shocked when I told her I was by myself. She was essentially mobbed then with people crowding her to give her stuff to give to Taylor. I thought we had finished talking until she grabbed my hands again and asked if I wanted to meet Taylor. After the concert a group of us who had all been invited to meet Taylor went backstage. There was a room set up with pizza, soda, themed cookies and a photo booth. They told us no selfies or videos and to wait our turn. Her mom came up to me and asked to take a picture with me, and her aunt came and introduced herself to me and talked. Taylor came out and talked to every single group for ages. She's truly a gem of a person. She wanted to hear everything you had to say and was always asking questions and truly listening. It was my 18th birthday and she wrote a note about it and made everyone sing to me lol. When she heard I came by herself she made me promise not to leave until she found someone to walk me to my car. She ended up sending her head of security with me. Later I posted my picture on Tumblr. She must have seen it and followed me. 3 years later I went to see her in London and she saw on Tumblr and invited me backstage. She technically wasn't allowed to have people there, so she hid us in the hallway. Talked to me like we were old friends. Incredible through and through. My buddy and I meet Quentin Tarantino in Austin. We weren't sure it was him at first, so my buddy walks up and says, anyone ever tell you you look like Tarantino? He replies, yeah, my mom. And proceeds to walk out the door. We were huge Pulp Fiction fans and totally messed up that encounter. Thank you for watching Reddit. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more r/AskReddit videos. Share your stories in the comments section below.